We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. On the ABC this morning, the Minister for Resources twice refused to guarantee that Australia won't run out of fuel as a result of the ongoing Iran war. Prime Minister, was the Minister for Resources correct in refusing this guarantee?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. I understand that Australians are following events in the Middle East and that they're seeing and feeling the consequences here at home. Our government is looking at every practical measure required to shield our nation and household budgets from the worst of this global uncertainty, ensuring that our farmers, our regional communities and the services all Australians rely on can continue to access the fuel that they need. We continue to see ships arrive carrying fuel in the quantities and frequencies we expect. The longer the conflict in the Middle East goes on, obviously the more significant the impact will be on the global economy. On any regular day, 20% of the world's oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz. And if that shipping route remains effectively closed, then that will have ongoing consequences for fuel prices, production, supply chains and, of course, an inflationary impact right around the world. Overnight, the International Energy Agency has said the challenge facing the world oil market is unprecedented in scale, which is why the IEA have agreed to the release of 400 million barrels of oil, the largest ever collective action. Australia is carefully considering our next steps in response to the IEA announcement. And today the Minister has directed more fuels into the Australian market, keeping more of the fuel that we make here in Australia here for Australians to use. And the National Coordination Mechanism is bringing industry, the states and territories and partners in our region together to get fuel to where it's needed most. Australia's fuel security and supply is our focus, not just in the last week but over the last 4 years. Introducing the minimum stockpiling obligation, building up our stockpiles of fuel, diesel and technical-grade urea, investing in making more liquid fuels here. We'll continue to deal with these issues calmly, methodically and in an orderly way, prioritising Australia's fuel supply and our fuel security, acting always in the national interest. And I note that in response to a question on a previous occasion of do we have to swing by the army disposals now and get our jerry cans, one of the members of this place said, "It is incredibly important people don't do this. It is not necessary. It's also not helpful. At the end of the day, there is a lot either in the supply chain or coming, and we're doing everything to make sure there's no prospect of a future disruption." He went on to say, "There's no need for additional buying." That was said by the Leader of the Opposition in 2021. He was right then, and if he said that today, he'd still be right.
Order. Give the call to the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister provide an update on conflict in the Middle East and its implications for Australians?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Chisholm for her question. Indeed, the Australian government continues to work around the clock to support Australians who are affected by the ongoing war in the Middle East. Our first priority, as always, is to keep Australians safe and to get help to Australians who need it. I can confirm that as of a little while ago, more than 3,600 Australians have returned on 26 flights, with further flights scheduled today and in coming days. The vast majority of Australians who were stranded while transiting through the Middle East have now made it home. Of course, many Australians will choose to stay where they work in and live in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Commercial flights are still the safest way for Australians to return. And I again reiterate, if people are offered seats on those commercial flights and they wish to return home, they should take them. They should take up the opportunities. Crisis support teams are on the ground in the region and consular support remains available. As we committed earlier this week, the Australian Defence Force is preparing the deployment of an E-7A Wedgetail aircraft to the Gulf, and a quantity of AMRAAMs will also be provided. These are important defensive weapons against Iran's unprovoked attacks against countries such as the UAE. This supports the defence of Gulf nations and contributes to the safety of civilians in the region, of course including the 24,000 Australians who are in the UAE. But the situation in the Middle East remains volatile and unpredictable. It is a dangerous situation, and we're seeing the impacts of the conflict right around the world. I again reiterate the Australian government's demand on Iran to cease all of these attacks and to call for de-escalation. Our priority, as always, is supporting Australians, keeping them safe and working in the national interest. We'll do that each and every day for as long as it is required.
Call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that Australia will not run out of fuel?
Order. Member for McEwen. The House comes to order. We'll hear the member for the Prime Minister.
It's just a rhetorical upgrade from the previous question that I was asked, in which I gave a comprehensive answer. A comprehensive answer.
Order.
Which is we are prioritising full security and supply. The fact is that we're putting in place all of these measures. Our reserves aren't in Texas. They're here and available.
Order. I'm not prepared to take the point of order because the Prime Minister is 15 seconds into his answer. And on previous Speaker's rulings on the 18th of June 2009, all through the way of the 19th of September 2019, and I can send those to the Leader, I'm not prepared to take the point of order. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Order. Resume your seat. We've had this before. I've been crystal clear. If there are, and if it was 2 minutes in or 2.5 minutes in, but it is completely unreasonable. Former speakers have followed exactly the same course I have. With seconds in, with the Prime Minister barely saying a few words, to take a point of order on relevance. And those members on my right, if you interject on the Prime Minister, you won't be here to hear the answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As the IEA have said overnight, this is internationally a very challenging time. What it isn't is a political opportunity. We're working with industry, we're working with the NFF, we're making sure that we put in place all the appropriate measures to ensure that there is fuel security in this country.
The call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy for further information for members to hear.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I can guarantee that Australia enters this crisis much better prepared. We currently have 36 days of petrol supply on hand, 29 days of jet fuel and 32 days of diesel. Now, the Leader of the Opposition was asked in 2020, when he held my position,
yes,
what's the minimum level?
I will take this point of order. The Minister will resume his seat. The Minister was not asked anything about the opposition. Resume your seat. I will now hear the point of order from the Manager.
Thanks, Speaker. It goes to direct relevance. The question was very straightforward. Can you guarantee Australia will not run out of fuel?
Resume your seat. So the Minister, I do not want him talking about the opposition. He's going to have to talk about the question that he was asked.
Indeed, Mr Speaker. I'm simply pointing out what previous ministers said would guarantee supply, because the then Minister for Energy was asked.
Order.
If I could, Mr Speaker.
No.
And he said 24 days.
Order. No, the Manager, I will deal with this.
I'll move on.
Yes, to assist the House. Resume.
I'll move on, Mr Speaker.
Order. We'll do this in a reasonable way. I've directed the Minister to return to the question, and he shall do so. Otherwise, we will move on to the next question.
I'll simply say, Mr Speaker, we entered this crisis with 36 days' worth of petrol, which is more than previous ministers said was necessary in a worst-case scenario. I might return to that later.
Order.
Mr Speaker, now, as the Prime Minister said,
the member for Cowper.
we deal with the situation currently where our fuel supplies continue to arrive, our fuel stocks continue to be strong, and any responsible member of this House, when we're dealing with a doubling of demand, would say that to the Australian people, that because we have strong supplies and because we have—
Minister will pause. Member for Cowper is on a warning. He will leave under 94A. I want the House to hear this information. The Minister is providing information to the House on an important issue, so I'm asking for everyone's assistance. Show respect, show restraint. The Minister has the call.
Any responsible member of the House would say that while there are real challenges here, because our fuel supplies are secure, there is no need for panic buying, and if honourable members undertake a different course of action, a national crisis is a time for leadership on both sides of the House. One side of the House is providing it, the other side of the House is playing politics.
The call to the honourable member for Spence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. What is the Albanese Labor government's response to the fuel challenges being caused by the conflict in the Middle East?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. The situation remains, Mr Speaker, in a very difficult international environment. Fuel supplies continue to arrive in Australia as scheduled, and our fuel stocks remain very strong. Our minimum stock obligation is being held and is in excess. But the situation also, Mr Speaker, is this, that in rural and regional in Australia in particular, we continue to see unacceptable shortages, we continue to see supply chain constraints, and we continue to see a doubling of demand. Now, Mr Speaker, it is the case that demand has doubled, use has not. Use has not, demand has doubled. And as I've said previously, to a certain degree that is very understandable as Australians are concerned when they see the news about what's happening internationally. Therefore, it's incumbent on all honourable members to continue the message that our fuel supplies are secure. In addition, Mr Speaker, the government has been working all week to ensure that we are doing everything possible with the industry to see as much supply as possible flow. And hence I'm pleased to announce to the House further actions undertaken today to build on the actions taken yesterday by the Treasurer and I and other ministers during the week. Today I have decided to relax the requirements under the Fuel Quality Act, Mr Speaker, when it comes to sulphur content on a temporary 60-day basis. This will see 100 million litres of fuel extra flow in Australia a month over that time. This, Mr Speaker, is relevant only to the Ampol refinery, which currently makes fuel for export to countries with lower fuel standards than us. This will, as I said, enable that supply to be blended into the Australian existing supply, and will see 100 million litres extra of fuel each month for the 2 months for which I will have provided the relaxation. I have received and I have asked for and received an assurance from Ampol that this extra supply will be prioritised for regional Australia and for the spot market to take pressure off those regional areas feeling such pressure, Mr Speaker. And I have received that. This will be felt most immediately in Queensland, where the Lytton refinery is. I can assure Australians, while this is a relaxation, our fuel quality will remain very high by international standards, higher than when we came to office. The standards will still be higher than in 2022 and indeed higher than 2025, but this sensible relaxation accompanies also the operation of the National Coordination Mechanism, which is operating as I speak, to ensure that we are working with industry. This is a practical measure, 100 million litres of extra fuel each month, which will be prioritised for regional Australia, with a particular emphasis on Queensland. This is action taken by the government. Opposition didn't call for this. The government has done it because it is a practical action to help farmers, to help regional Australians through this immediate crisis.
Give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors. Minister, your government promised that in a transition to your once-in-a-generation reforms, older people getting care at home would be no worse off. Yet many seniors in my electorate who have been approved for home care packages are left stuck in the national priority queue with only limited interim help because providers are at capacity. Will you urgently review these long-waited transition cases and set clear maximum wait times so older Australians are not left in limbo without real support at home while your reforms roll out?
Call to the Minister for Seniors and the Minister for Aged Care.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Fowler for her question. I appreciate the constructive conversations that we've had about older people and their care in her community. As I've said consistently, we want every Australian to be able to access safe, dignified and high-quality aged care services. And to that end, as the member's question referred, we are engaging in generational reform of Australia's aged care system. The new Aged Care Act came into effect on the 1st of November, and along with it, the new Support at Home program, again to which the member's question refers. Labor has increased aged care funding overall by over 40% since the Liberals were last in government. That is one of the steps that we're taking. However, demand for care is growing very rapidly. Today, almost 350,000 Australians are receiving care through the Support at Home program, and that's more than double the number of places compared to the Home Care Packages program just 5 years ago. Over the next 40 years, the number of Australians aged over 65 is expected to more than double, and those aged 85 and over will more than triple. To meet this demand in the short term, we're in the process of rolling out an additional 83,000 support at home places this financial year alone. These extra packages are getting more older Australians the care they need faster, and they're taking pressure off the national priority system, which had dropped by over 25,000 people to the end of last year. We're also seeing encouraging signs that our reforms are moving the assessment system in the right direction. Between the April, June and July, September quarters of 2025, median wait times for home support assessments dropped by 7 days, and median comprehensive assessment wait times are now sitting well under a month consistently. Mr Speaker, we know there's always more work to do, and we'll continue focusing on reducing wait times further so that every older Australian can access care as soon as possible. The new Aged Care Act established a sustainable funding model, so those who can afford to contribute to their care do so, while those with fewer means can continue to access care. Mr Speaker, this is what good stewardship looks like. We have taken the prudent steps to ensure that the aged care system is sustainable and is equitable and can serve the generations of Australians into the future.
The call to the honourable member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. What actions is the Albanese Labor government taking to support Australian farmers to continue producing food and fibre during the conflict in the Middle East?
Call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fishery and Forestries.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank our member for Bullwinkle, and I know that the farmers and producers in her electorate, like those right across the country, are working day and night to ensure that we continue to get the fibre and the food that we need here in Australia and indeed right across the globe, Mr Speaker. As we do know, fuel and fertiliser are critical for our farmers, and the fuel is also important, of course, to keep our fishers fishing as well. And as I said in here yesterday, we do know the conflict in the Middle East is causing disruptions. And we've been hearing directly from industry, from our farmers, from our producers and from our fishers some of the challenges that they're facing right now, particularly in rural and regional Australia. We know that fuel supplies continue to arrive in this country, but we also know that we need to continue to work to support our industry with these challenges. Following our roundtable earlier in this week, Mr Speaker, both the ACCC and the Australian Institute of Petroleum are working with suppliers to address some of the bottlenecks and to make sure that our regional communities are getting the fuel they need. And we just heard from the Minister for Energy about the additional action that he has taken to ensure more fuel for our regional economies. And as the Australian Institute of Petroleum said yesterday, and I do quote, "Ensuring fuel supply to every part of Australia is vitally important, to every town, to every community and to every business." And the President of the National Farmers Federation, Hamish McIntyre, who said, and I quote, "We're all working together now to make sure there's a fair and even distribution," Mr Speaker. Our government has also announced that we're doubling the penalties for false and misleading conduct and cartel behaviour. And the ACCC will ramp up fuel price monitoring even further.
Order. Members on my
and as
left.
we've heard, we've acted to have the National Coordination Mechanism to respond even further. So we have better coordination, better cooperation, more scrutiny, more surveillance. And Fertiliser Australia were also part of this week's roundtable, Mr Speaker, because, of course, we do know that fertiliser is critical. And in the same way that industry is working with the ACCC to supply fuel to the regions, Minister Ayres and I are working with industry and the ACCC on similar arrangements for fertiliser supply. As I've said, while much of the fertiliser required for the upcoming season is already in the country or on the water, we do continue to closely monitor this situation and will keep listening and working with farmers and industry to ensure the supply that is available. Australians expect all of us in this place, Mr Speaker, and everyone along the supply chains to continue to act in our nation's best interests. And I implore those opposite and those in the supply chains to take this seriously. The conflict in the Middle East is not a commercial opportunity nor a political one, and Australians do expect all of us to continue to act in the national interest.
Call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The Minister for Energy has just informed the House that Australia is in, I quote, a national crisis on fuel supply. Prime Minister, is the Minister correct?
Order. Members on my right. The Minister for Infrastructure will cease interjecting immediately. Prime Minister has the call.
Well, the big message for every Australian is don't panic. The supplies are there. We all have a role to play in that. Stick to our normal daily operations and schedules and don't think that we always have to keep topping up. The fuel is coming. Not my words, the words of the member for Maranoa, who has an electorate this week. How can that not be relevant?
Order. This question requires a yes-no response, which I understand the opposition is seeking. I cannot direct the Prime Minister to answer the question in that way, but I will give the call to the manager and will ask him to succinctly say his point of order.
Thanks, Speaker, and it goes to Standing Order 104 on direct relevance. Australians want to know whether...
Yeah. Once again, 30 seconds in, the Prime Minister is being directly relevant. He was reading a quote about the exact topic he was asked into the Hansard from another current Member of Parliament. He couldn't be more directly relevant. If he has more quotes, I'll make sure they are being directly relevant, as all Prime Ministers and Ministers have done, certainly for the last 10 years that I've been here. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, the bloke next to him who said this, I'd stress to people not necessarily to do that, panic buy. We obviously have reserve supplies. That is what the member for Page had to say. So they're still at this stage sitting on the front bench. Who knows where they'll be? Who knows where they'll be when we come back?
Order.
The bubble. Those opposite suggest that I'm talking about them. They just talk about themselves, Mr Speaker. On a week in which they've knocked off another leader, they suggest that we're talking about internals. Mr Speaker,
Order.
What the minister has said is this.
Order.
On the minimum stockholding obligation, petrol 36 days, jet fuel 29 days, diesel 32 days. And what others have said, what others have deemed as the minimal level is, depending upon the fuel type, they said, 24 days for petrol. Well, we got 36. 24 days for jet fuel. Well, we got 29. And 28 for diesel. Well, we got 32. That's what this bloke said when he was the Energy Minister. So, according to the Leader of the Opposition, we not only have are delivering. Well, yesterday, Mr Speaker, they asked a question. They came to the dispatch box and said, "When will the war end? When will the war end?" And today they come to the dispatch box and say, "Is there a crisis?" There is a war in the Middle East. It is having an impact. It is having an impact. And if those opposite want to wish it away and pretend that that is not happening, then what they show is that they are simply unfit not only to be a government, not only to be an alternative government, no wonder they're barely in opposition and being led by the bloke up in the corner.
Order. Before I call the member for Gellibrand, when the House comes to order. When the House comes to order, I would like to recognise some visitors that have joined us in the gallery. Order. The Leader of the Opposition, Prime Minister, I'd like to recognise a special visit. The Leader of the Opposition, I'm trying to recognise the Foreign Minister who is visiting this country from Estonia. A very warm welcome to you and welcome to question time. I'd also order. 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 I promised the Foreign Minister earlier today that he would witness democracy in action, and here you are. I'd also like to acknowledge Faye and Sam Hello, a wonderful couple that run a wonderful organisation called Days for Girls, represented by the member for Reid, and a welcome to you all to Parliament as well. Now give the call to the honourable member for Gellibrand.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. What action is the Albanese government taking to address petrol prices and fuel supply? How does this compare with other approaches?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and to the member for Gellibrand for his great question. He understands better than those opposite the local implications of instability in the world and big movements in global markets. We know that developments in the Middle East are putting additional pressure on people here at home, especially when it comes to volatility in energy prices. Just this week, we've seen oil prices trading as low as almost $80, as high as almost $120 a barrel, but it was $60 in January. We know that people are worried about these pressures and we are acting where we can. Our message to the retailers is do not take advantage of motorists. We've taken important steps to crack down on any retailers who do try and take advantage of the situation. Just yesterday we announced the doubling of fines. We increased surveillance of suspicious price spikes. And we're working with industry and the ACCC to coordinate supply, especially to regional areas where there are particular concerns. This is on top of the extra powers we already gave the ACCC, including to issue on-the-spot fines. And I spoke to the chair of the ACCC very early this morning to make sure they have what they need and they're on the case, Mr Speaker. Now, I also wanted to remind the House that in November of last year, this government passed important changes to the Fuel Security Act 2021 and the Petroleum and Other Fuels Reporting Act 2017. Now, Mr Speaker, in the explanatory memoranda of the legislation that we updated in November, it said it was all about providing additional tools to manage critical fuel shortages and ensure that Australia is not hampered by temporary shortages, Mr Speaker. And what that legislation did was it made our stockpiles more accessible in times of disruption. It required more transparency around fuel supplies and also mandatory reporting of diesel exhaust fluid and urea shortages, Mr Speaker. Now, the reason that I raised this legislation that we moved and passed in this place and the other place in November of last year is because those opposite voted against it. They voted against it. If you can believe it, Mr Speaker, with all the politics that they are now playing, they came in this place and they voted against our efforts to manage the stockpiles more effectively for situations like the one that we find ourselves in today, Mr Speaker. And doesn't it say everything about those opposite, that when they had the chance to do the right thing, to update our fuel security arrangements, they came in here and in the usual way they voted no, Mr Speaker. The same people who stored our fuel in Texas and saw 6 refineries become 2 refineries, the same people scaring people and making the situation worse, they will play their politics. We will work through these issues in a considered and methodical but urgent and decisive way, not just acknowledging people's concerns but acting on them.
Just remind the manager to wait till I give him the call before approaching the dispatch box. The Manager of Opposition Business with his question.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources. On the ABC this morning, the Minister for Resources on 2 occasions refused to guarantee that Australia won't run out of fuel as a result of the ongoing Iran war. Can the Minister for Resources guarantee Australia won't run out of fuel due to the ongoing Iran war? Minister, is this a national crisis?
Give the call to the Minister for Resources and the Minister for Northern Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the leader of the manager. I thank the member for his question. What I can guarantee, it really is, Prime Minister, it really is. But to the question directly, Mr. Speaker, what I will guarantee to the Australian people is that they will be far better placed to withstand the international shocks caused by the conflict in the Middle East, with this government looking out for their interests and always acting in the national interest, than if those MPs on the other side were on these Treasury benches.
Order.
It is these people behind me,
Order.
these Labor MPs, that will fight always in the national interest, and I guarantee that they will work to make sure that the Australian people are well supplied with fuel. The Treasurer has just highlighted exactly what those opposite have done. Voted against important reform to make sure the Australian people can have access to the stockpiles of fuel that the Minister for Energy and Climate Change has made sure exist, while the Leader of the Opposition made sure it was in Texas or somewhere. I don't even know anymore. It's so confusing, whatever their stockpiling plan was. And now they come in here and try and make accusations about what we are doing in the interests of Australian people.
Has the Minister concluded her answer?
Yeah, myself. Thank you.
Give the call to order. Members on my right, there's far too many interjections. We'll hear from the honourable member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting working Australians? How does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Cunningham for her question and her steadfast commitment for sticking up for Australian workers. Our government has made significant reforms to ensure that Australians can better balance their work and personal life. Of course, it was our government that introduced the right to disconnect, which means Australians now have a right to enjoy time off with their family and friends guilt-free. Now, Anna, an aged carer, described the right to disconnect as life-changing, helping her better balance her work and family. Now, of course, talking about things the opposition votes against, of course those opposite voted against the right to disconnect, with the newly appointed Shadow Minister for Employment labelling these laws as unreasonable. Well, unlike those opposite, we on this side of the House believe workers like Anna deserve to have work-life balance, and we do not believe it's unreasonable. Now, of course, our laws are also strengthening access to flexible work, making it easier for workers to request arrangements like work from home. Now, the analysis from the Committee of Economic Development of Australia highlights that work-from-home policies can save Aussies up to $110 per week. Well, not only did the Coalition vote against these important improvements, but as we all know now, Senator Hume took it even further by committing at the last election to abolish work from home altogether. Now, this was a terrible policy that would have hurt many workers, especially women workers. Don't just take it from me. The Liberals' own election review confirmed that this was a terrible policy. The review highlighted that this policy demonstrated, and I quote, the Liberals were unsympathetic to the needs of women to better balance their work and family life. Of course, it was also highlighted in their election review voters were turned away from voting Liberal because this policy would have made life more difficult. Now, the review also, and I did read it, called for some critical reflection from those opposite. But instead, we have Senator Hume doubling down and defending the ban on work from home, saying it was the policy backflip, not the policy itself that was a problem. Well, that certainly doesn't sound like a whole lot of critical self-reflection to me. What is really clear is while the Liberals may have changed leader, they have not learnt anything from the last election.
Order.
It is only Labor that will back Aussies balancing life and family and work.
To the honourable member for Nichols.
Describing the current fuel situation as a national crisis.
Minister, might just allow the member, because the microphone wasn't on and the minister needs to hear the full question. I'll just invite the member for Nichols to restart and begin his question again.
My question is to the Minister for Energy and Climate Change. I refer to the minister's previous answer describing the current fuel situation as a national crisis. Minister, are we in a national crisis?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question. It may have escaped members opposite, but there's a war going on. Do I regard a war as a crisis? Yes, I do. Yes, I do, Mr Speaker. Do I regard the implications of that war, Mr Speaker, when it comes to fuel internationally as a crisis? Yes, I do, Mr Speaker. That's why the International Energy Agency last night agreed to the largest ever coordinated action in its history. I spent time on the phone last night to the Executive Director of the IEA, Mr Speaker, discussing that international crisis. And I'll tell you what, Mr Speaker, if I think a farmer can't get fuel, is it a crisis for that farmer? Yes, I do, Mr Speaker. Yes, I do. Maybe those opposite don't agree. If I think, Mr Speaker—
Order.
Do I think if a fishing company can't get access to diesel for that fishing, do I think it's a crisis to that company? Yes, I do. So apparently I think that and members opposite don't, Mr Speaker. I understand their sensitivity because they wanted us less prepared. They wanted us less prepared for this, not more prepared. Not only did they keep the fuel supplies in Texas, but as the Treasurer has outlined, last year, just last year, this government legislated for this very eventuality. This government legislated better preparations, and I quote, "The bill amends minimum stockholding obligation for fuel importers and refiners to provide the relevant minister with additional tools to manage critical fuel shortages." As the relevant minister, I find that quite helpful, Mr Speaker, and I find the fact that this government legislated it a good thing, and the fact that those opposite voted against it deeply disappointing, but part of a pattern of behaviour, Mr Speaker, because the point I was making—
Order.
The point I was making is that crises, whether international or otherwise, are a chance for both sides of the House to provide leadership, Mr Speaker. That's the point I was making that they were offended by, that they were so offended by. As someone who sat in this House now for a while through COVID as Shadow Health Minister, I know that, Mr Speaker. I know when I worked with the then Health Minister that was an opportunity for both sides to provide leadership. Those of us who held opposition office at that time know that. As I said before in that answer, Mr Speaker, and I stand by every word of that answer, and I stand by this part, the fact that you choose to make politics in a crisis says more about the opposition than it does about the government.
Order. There's far too much noise. I'm now issuing a general warning, so it means everyone's up for grabs. Order. It's just too much noise. So we'll take action. Give the call to the member for Griffith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting women and gender equality, and are there any risks to this progress?
Give a call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government representing the Minister for Women.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Griffith for her question. She is one of 50 fabulous women we have on this side of the chamber. And I'm so pleased to say that this past Sunday, to mark International Women's Day, the Albanese government annual Status of Women's report card showed that we are making progress towards gender equality. The report shows that Australia is ranked 13th globally for gender equality, our highest score ever, when we were ranked in 2022 under those opposite at 43rd. It also shows that the gender pay gap is now 11.5%, our lowest ever. When those opposite left office, we were at 14.1%. And now I know, because of the work of our fabulous Minister for Health, over 300,000 women have accessed new, cheaper contraceptives on the PBS in the last year alone. We are so proud of these achievements. Supporting women is good for our communities, good for our families and good for the economy, and we are backing that up with real action. We've legislated for 10 days paid domestic violence and family leave. We've expanded paid parental leave to 6 months and we're paying super on it. And we've supported pay increases in female-dominated industries such as childcare and in aged care. And for us, these issues are front and centre of our economic agenda. On this side of the House, we are moving forward with women's equality. We only need to walk some 20 steps in that direction to go back almost 20 years. Last month we saw the Liberals roll their first female leader, and just yesterday we saw the Nationals elect Senator Canavan as their leader.
The minister will pause. The member for Forrest will leave the chamber for continually interjecting and showing disrespect to the minister. The Minister in continuation.
And a little reminder that when our government introduced reporting on the gender pay gap, Senator Canavan called the report a hill of nonsense and completely useless. It's good to see that the disdain for advancing women's economic participation is at least something the Libs and the Nationals can bond over. How can we forget, as the Minister for Industrial Relations said, the Liberals' attack on women through their working from home policy? I know they like to tell you, but I'll tell you, the women of Australia haven't forgotten this. In fact, they tried so hard to bury this policy that they went so far as to try and bury the whole Liberal Party election review. And you can see why. On page 34, it said that the Liberals' messaging was unsympathetic to the needs of women to better balance their work and family life. But not even the party office agreed either. They said that the party must continue to allow flexible working arrangements. But of course the Liberals weren't the only party to bury their election review. The Nationals did exactly the same thing, and is it any wonder when it contains one of the recommendations contains that old chestnut from Tony Abbott that we need to recruit more women of calibre. Can I tell you, I shouldn't have to tell you this, but all women are women of calibre and all women are capable of being in this place.
Give the call. Order. We will hear from the honourable member for Kooyong.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is for the Treasurer. Treasurer, when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Woodside doubled its profits. The PRRT fails to capture windfall profits from conflicts like those in Ukraine and Iran. In a cost-of-living crisis, will you impose a windfall tax on the excess profits of oil and gas companies so that Australians can feel confident that we will receive a fair return on our finite national resources?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. I do know and acknowledge that there are a range of views about the sorts of issues that the honourable member has raised. For our part, in this government, we've already made some changes to the PRRT, which will ensure that Australians collect more tax sooner from the export of offshore gas. And we made those changes because we know that there's an expectation in the Australian community that PRRT, that companies who pay the PRRT need to pay their fair share of tax. The changes that we made means extra billions of dollars sooner to help fund the government's priorities, including in areas like Medicare and housing and all of the important objectives that the honourable member for Kooyong and the government share. And so those are the steps that we have taken. We've taken those steps. That's not often acknowledged when people call for more to be done. We acknowledge and respect those calls to do more, but we've already acted in a fairly substantial way.
Call to the honourable member for Bass.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government progressing on its reforms to make the university system better and fairer for students? How does this compare with other approaches?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank my friend, the beloved member for Bass, for a question. Mr Speaker, we've cut student debt by 20%. That means we've cut the debt of millions of Australians by thousands of dollars. And as I told the House this week and last week, more Australians will start a uni degree this year than ever before. That's more teachers, that's more nurses, that's more doctors too. And this year we're taking the next step to help make getting a university degree quicker and cheaper. If you've done a TAFE course in the same area, it should cut the length and the cost of your degree. I can tell you, Mr Speaker, that this year I'll also introduce legislation to help more young people from poor families and from the bush to get a crack at going to university. If you're from a poor background, if you're from regional or rural Australia and you get the marks, if you've got the skills, then you'll get a place at university, a Commonwealth-supported place. But, Mr Speaker, we've also got to fix this year some of the things that have put universities on the front pages of our newspapers for all the wrong reasons. Our universities do great things, but if you think that we don't have challenges with the way some of them are governed, then you've been living under a rock. That's why we set up the National Student Ombudsman, and this year we'll take the next step. This year, for the first time, the Remuneration Tribunal will get involved in the setting of salaries for Vice-Chancellors. University boards will have to become a lot more open and a lot more accountable. And I'll introduce legislation to strengthen the powers of TEXA, that's the university regulator, so they've got the sort of powers that they need to act when universities don't or won't. At the moment, they've effectively got a sledgehammer or a feather and not much in between. Mr Speaker, there's also more work that we need to do to weed out anti-Semitism. As part of that, we've appointed David Gonski to chair the Anti-Semitism Education Task Force. David is a man who I'm sure is respected by everybody in this chamber and knows the education system inside and out. This is an intense 12-month piece of work right across the education system, from preschool to school, TAFE and university. But it's not just anti-Semitism we have to tackle. We're not a racist country, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Of course it does. And it's a problem in our universities as well. The report I released a couple of weeks ago and the 76,000 submissions from students and staff make that clear. And we've got to tackle all of this. It's not about belting universities, it's about making them better.
Before I call the member for Durack, I'd like to also welcome members of the One Gippsland delegation who are joining us today as guests of the members for Monash and Gippsland. Welcome to Question Time. With a call to the honourable member for Durack.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, the WA Country Health Service has told its staff, and I quote, "Please make sure all cars are not left below 3/4 of a tank at all times. Fuel availability at your next destination cannot be guaranteed." End quote. Can the Minister guarantee that the employees of the WA Country Health Service are able to access a secure supply of fuel in this national crisis?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question, although I must confess I'm a little surprised that I've just announced an additional 100 million litres of supply and the opposition has not asked a question about it, Mr Speaker. But
Order.
In relation
Member for Groom.
And with a guarantee that regional areas will be prioritised, but
Order.
And Western Australia is connected to the entire country, Mr Speaker. It's part of the same country, Mr Speaker. But Mr Speaker, in relation to health services, I will say, obviously, I will work closely with the Western Australian Government and health services, and there are some honourable members who have been to see me over the last 48 hours from that side of the House who have been to see me about particular issues in their electorate and have asked me to address them, and I work very hard with them to address them. And if the honourable member chooses to do that as well, she's very welcome.
We call to order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the honourable member for Swan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to help vulnerable Australians find secure and stable housing? Is the government aware of any alternative approaches to this crucial work?
We call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Swan for her question. Speaker, our government is funding the build of 500 social and affordable homes in her electorate alone, Speaker, and next week she is turning the sod on the beginning of construction of 170 of those homes. It's going to be a great day for Swan. Speaker, we've got a national housing challenge that's been building for decades, and for some Australians the stakes here could not be higher. Whether we're thinking about pensioners who are at risk of homelessness, women and children who are fleeing family violence, or young families who might be being pushed from unaffordable rental to unaffordable rental, housing for these people in our community is a matter of safety and it's a matter of security. And that is why, Speaker, building social and affordable housing is right at the heart of our government's housing agenda. Speaker, we are building 55,000 social and affordable homes in every corner of our country. Every single one of those homes will change the life of an Australian and their family. Now, Speaker, it is self-evidently obvious that our country needs to be building more social housing, so you would think that our government's initiatives would have bipartisan support. Unfortunately, what we have seen from the coalition is every single opportunity has been taken to delay and block the building of desperately needed housing. Now, Speaker, it is shameful, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised because this is perfectly consistent to what we saw the coalition do during the wasted decade. Remember, Speaker, 9 years for most of that period they couldn't even be bothered having a housing minister. And unbelievably, Speaker, they built 373 homes over 9 years. We're building 55,000. Now, Speaker, the Shadow Treasurer has been unusually open about his personal views about social housing, and I want to share those with the Parliament. He has said our real objective should not be to build more social housing. He went on to say that his view is that social housing, and I'm quoting him here, Speaker, suffocates the spirit of entrepreneurialism. Really? I know, Speaker. I read that. I couldn't quite believe it. I don't think I have ever heard a more snobbish comment in my entire life, Speaker. I stand next to a Prime Minister who is proof of what social housing can do, Speaker. Social housing gave him and his family safety, security and a platform on which he went on to lead our country, and every person on our side of the chamber is damn proud of that. Now, Speaker, this is what those opposite don't understand. Social housing doesn't suffocate ambition. It gives people a platform on which to grow. Now, Speaker, when Australians are doing it tough, Labor does not turn its back. We build more housing, we protect the vulnerable, and we will not stop until every person in this country who deserves safe housing has got access to it.
The call to the honourable member for Mackellar.
Thank you, Speaker. People in my electorate of Mackellar are concerned about recent media reports.
I'll just ask the
member
to begin her question again and to direct where the question is to go.
Thank you,
Speaker.
Speaker.
The member for Mackellar has the call.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. People in my electorate of Mackellar are concerned about recent media reports that allege the government offered the coalition more personal staff in exchange for their support of the controversial Freedom of Information Amendment Bill. To avoid perceived conflict of interest, will the Prime Minister commit to ensuring personal staff allocations for non-government parliamentarians are decided by an independent body rather than awarded at the discretion of the Prime Minister of the day? Thank you.
The Prime Minister has the call. Order. Members on my left. Order. The Prime Minister has the call. Order.
I thank the member for McKellar for her question. And when I became Prime Minister, I was somewhat surprised to hear that under the Morrison government, members of the crossbench had double the number of staff as members of the Labor Party, the Liberal Party and the National Party. They had double. Now, with respect, I'm not sure what those arrangements were, but they were double. Not only did the Morrison government not report that or come to the dispatch box, they were pretty quiet up in that corner about it too, Mr Speaker. They were pretty quiet about it up in that corner. So I thought it was a bit unreasonable that people who were side by side in electorates, such as Bennelong next to the 3 seats that are now occupied by independents, should have half the staff, and the people of Bennelong should get the capacity to just have half the representation of people who were independents. I just thought that was not... that just failed the common sense test. And that was my view, and I noticed that it was the view also of members of the then Morrison government were also not told, Mr Speaker.
Order. No, I'm not taking the point of order. In line with my earlier decision, the Prime Minister was asked a question. He's being directed on it. Resume your seat. Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, I make this point also, that I think that the allocations have been fair and reasonable as a proportion. People who are on the crossbench have more staff than people who are here on this side or on that side of the chamber, of that chamber, because of the argument that is put there about not being part of party processes. But I think it's been more than fair. But I do make this point, that the most number of representations that I have had from crossbenchers in the House and in the Senate isn't about health policy, it isn't about education policy, it isn't about housing policy, it's about their staff.
Order. Order. When the House comes to order. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the Chief Government Whip.
Well, thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making it easier for Australians to see a bulk billing GP after a decade of cuts and neglect? What information is available about alternative policies?
Give the call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Lawler. She is such a powerful advocate for a stronger Medicare, in part because she's such a true believer for universal health care, but in part also because she's seen what a difference this is making to her community, Mr Speaker. Already more than 33,000 people have gone through the Werribee Medicare Urgent Care Clinic, every single one of them fully bulk billed. And can I say, Mr Speaker, that today more than 80% of general practices in the members' electorate are bulk billing all of their patients all of the time, Mr Speaker. We're seeing more bulk billing right across the country, Mr Speaker. Before our investments on November 1 took place, only about 2,000 general practices in Australia were 100% bulk billing, Mr Speaker. We expected that number to get to 3,600 by 2028, on our way to our target of 90% bulk billing by the end of the decade. And I can report that today that number is 3,581, up from 2,000 and just 19 short of our 2028 target, Mr Speaker, and it's increasing every single week. That's our plan, Mr Speaker. That's our approach. But the member asks me about alternative approaches. Well, of course, as I said last week, the Leader of the Opposition is a little hard to pin down here because he's been just so busy wiping the historical slate clean. I went back to his personal website and still there is not a single report of the media statements he made supporting Peter Dutton's GP tax, supporting the Medicare freeze. Indeed, if you type into the search engine of angustaylor.gov Medicare or health, all you get, of course, is no response. I'm obsessed. I have to admit, I'm obsessed. Trying to find some record, it's hard. You've got to go back to the Wayback Machine, as I said, to the new Deputy Leader of the Nationals. It's much like the Liberal Party election review, which, surprise, surprise, in 52 long, painful pages, mentioned Medicare and health exactly not a single time, Mr Speaker. Apparently nothing to learn, no insights at all. But, of course, there is someone over there who is always overflowing with insights, and that is the Shadow Treasurer, the man who wants to privatise Medicare. And I wondered why. And he gave an explanation about why he dislikes the current Medicare arrangements just last month. This dispatch box, Mr Speaker, this is how the Shadow Treasurer described our healthcare system: a system designed to keep people ill, to feed the benefits of the unions. That's the insult the Shadow Treasurer makes to Australia's doctors, to Australia's nurses, to Australia's hard-working health professionals. That's the different approach. That's the different approach from those opposite.
Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Barker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Can the minister rule out making any changes to the diesel fuel credit arrangements, noting that any changes will slug farmers and miners?
Order. I can't hear the member. The member for call will leave the chamber under 94A. Just simply yell out while someone... The member for Barker will just pause. And out of respect for Mr Barker, he'll begin his question again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Can the minister rule out making any changes to the diesel fuel credit arrangements, noting that any changes will slug farmers and miners with a tax increase of roughly 20 cents a litre, which will flow directly through to Australians in the form of higher fuel and grocery prices in this national crisis?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. I seem to recall he was excluded from the House earlier in the week, and maybe that's why he didn't hear my answer to the member for Mackellar, where I said the government's policy has not changed and pointed out it provides strong support for farmers, Mr Speaker. That's what I said earlier in the week to the member for Mackellar. That's what I say to the honourable member.
Give the call to order. Give the call to the member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to strengthen paid parental leave, and what are the risks?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and thanks so much to the member for Holt. She's a big supporter of paid parental leave for all those young families in her electorate that rely on it and benefit from it. As I've said before, Mr Speaker, it is really surprising that Australia was one of the very few developed countries in the world not to have a paid parental leave scheme before the Rudd and Gillard governments. We are so proud of the fact that it's Labor that introduced paid parental leave and Labor that continues to expand paid parental leave. We are providing more time, more money, more flexibility and more people with this benefit. More time. This year we will get to 6 months paid parental leave. More money. Each week recipients will get a higher payment, $200 a week more and superannuation for the first time on paid parental leave because of decisions this government has made. More flexibility, more time for mums and dads to take off together, and of course more people are eligible. Since we came to government in 2022, someone receiving paid parental leave is $12,000 better off. We've almost doubled paid parental leave. Of course, we are very clear that we are for more and better paid parental leave. Those on the other side are frankly all over the place on this. We had a former Treasurer who called mothers double dippers. We had the former Prime Minister who called them rorters. We've got the current Shadow Treasurer who says about their own scheme, it's a very bad scheme. It's not my choice that women have children. Now we've got the leader of the National Party who says that in response to Baby Priya's bill, that women were going to deliberately get pregnant and have late-term abortions to get paid parental leave. We've got a leader of the opposition who went to the election saying that he wanted to see higher taxes and lower wages for working mums. We've got a deputy leader of the opposition in the other place, I mean, I think that's her title, it's not very clear, who wanted to cut off access to working from home for working mums. And, you know, look, essentially they are all over the place on supports for working families. What we know for certain on this side is we are for paid parental leave. We are for cheaper childcare. We are for higher wages and lower taxes for working mums. We are for workplace flexibility, including working from home. And we are for supporting families to look after their kids with that security.
Call to the honourable member for McKellar.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Was personal staff used as a way to encourage the coalition to support the Freedom of Information Amendment Bill? Thank you.
Order. Order. I think that question is barely within the standing orders, and I'll allow it, but the Prime Minister will obviously be able to be broad with that answer.
Well,
if he chooses
they didn't, much to their shame, because this is an area that needs reform.
Give a call to the member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for Australians and working in the national interest? What have been the risks to this agenda?
Order. Members on my left will cease rejecting. Members on my right. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. And of course, this is a government that's focused on the interests of Australians each and every day. And in the last fortnight, we've been advancing that agenda. Whether it be last week showing the national accounts, which showed stronger growth than any advanced economy in the world. That showed business investment on the rise.
Order.
That showed dwelling investment on the rise. That followed up from the figures, of course, that showed that the unemployment rate at 4.1% remains at a historic low. We on this side regard employment as being an absolutely key task, unlike, of course, the incoming Shadow Treasurer who said that they should get rid of the mandate of employment for the Reserve Bank and should not worry about it. The same person who, of course, has said in Hansard, no one wins from low interest rates on the record going forward. We have been focused on that. At the same time, we this week have made superannuation stronger and fairer by helping low and middle income earners to have more in their superannuation support accounts, whilst at the same time impacting people with high balances. We at the same time have been out there assisting with natural disasters. We have our minister, as we speak, is up there in the Northern Territory assisting, and I'm in constant contact with the Queensland Premier as well about the floods that are impacting areas such as Bundaberg and Gympie.
For Goldstein, and the Leader of the Nationals in the House of Representatives will cease interjecting, particularly when the Prime Minister is talking about that topic. Order.
And of course, the gender pay gap, as the Minister for Social Services and the Minister representing the Minister for Women have said, is now at a record low, something that we are very proud of. So we've been dealing with these issues in the context as well of the fact that there is a war. That's right. I've gone through now 2 weeks here and there hasn't been a question asked about that war. That is having an extraordinary impact on the world. And those opposite have asked questions of when will the war end, and they've asked, is there a crisis? When the whole world, whether they be in Australia, in the United States, in the Middle East or anywhere else, knows that this is a massive challenge for the entire world and the global community. And in between dealing with things on a day-to-day basis, I've been talking with leaders internationally about that.
Order.
But today we've had an announcement about the release of 100 million litres of fuel a month.
Order.
Again, no questions from those opposite. We will continue to be the adults in the room.
Order.
Those opposite.
Order. The Prime Minister has the call. Resume your seat.
Sit down.
Everyone will resume it. The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The member for Flynn will resume his seat too. Order.
He's been on TV enough this week. Further questions be placed on the notice paper, Mr. Speaker.